Hello everyone, welcome to another lecture video from Biosite. In this lecture, we are going to discuss about the process of respiration. This is one of the topics from the chapter Life Processes, Class 10 Biology. Let's start today's lecture. So, respiration is the process by which food is broken down inside the cells to release energy needed for life processes. So, the food material taken during nutrition is used by cells to provide energy for various activities, and different organisms may use different pathways for releasing energy. Some pathways use oxygen while others do not use oxygen. So, in the previous lecture, we have seen about the nutrition of human beings, where the food is taken by us will be processed in our digestive system and utilized by the cells, and the stored form of food in the human beings is in the form of glycogen. So whenever the energy is required by our body, the glycogen will be converted into glucose, and the glucose will be oxidized to generate energy, and this energy is required for our body for the life processes. So this glucose oxidation takes place in order to generate energy for the life processes. So in some cases, the oxygen may or may not be required or may not be available. So in different kinds of organisms, different kinds of glucose oxidation takes place to generate energy. Let's see in detail. So different organisms may use different pathways for releasing energy. Some pathways use oxygen while others do not use oxygen. So here the most important point is respiration is a cellular process for the energy release. So this energy will be required for the life processes. The first step in respiration is the breakdown of glucose. So for this breakdown of glucose, the oxygen is at most required. So after the oxidation of the glucose, the energy will be released and it is stored mainly in the form of ATP. So what happens in the process of respiration? First step is breakdown of glucose. So glucose is a 6 carbon compound. So when you see the formula of glucose, it says C6H12O6. So it is a 6 carbon compound. So in the cytoplasm, the glucose is broken down into pyruvate, which is a 3 carbon compound. So the cell consists of cytoplasm, which is a jelly-like water jelly-like substance, and in the cytoplasm, the glucose will be broken down into pyruvate, which is a 3 carbon molecule, and this process is known as glycolysis. The initial breakdown occurs whether the oxygen is available or not. The further fate of pyruvate depends mainly on the availability of oxygen and the organism or cell. So this pyruvate formation occurs whether the oxygen is available or not, which means the oxygen is partially available at initial steps. After the formation of pyruvate, the fate of pyruvate is totally depends upon the availability of oxygen. So what is ATP? ATP is the stored form of energy which is generated during the process of respiration. So you can see the definition. And the energy released during cellular respiration is used to make ATP. The full form of ATP is adenosine triphosphate, and the ATP triphosphate consists of three phosphates. The ATP can be used immediately for activities such as muscle contraction, protein synthesis, nerve impulses, and other cellular works. So imagine a battery. Uh, a battery is at most important for the activity of electrical objects, right? Similarly, the ATP is such a thing which provides energy for the activities such as muscle contraction and protein synthesis and nerve impulses and some other cellular works. So ATP is formed when ADP combines with inorganic phosphate using released energy. So this is the process of formation of ATP. ADP, which means adenosine diphosphate, upon combines with inorganic phosphate in the presence of certain amount of energy gives adenosine triphosphate, which is the stored form of energy, and this ATP stored in the mitochondria uh, as a usable energy for cellular activities. So this is the byproduct of cellular respiration. So let's see the fate of pyruvate. After the glucose is converted to pyruvate in the cytoplasm, the pyruvate can follow the different pathways. The pathway depends on the presence or absence of oxygen. So in case of respiration is basically of two types. One is anaerobic respiration and the second one is aerobic respiration. So let's see the fate of pyruvate in case of anaerobic respiration. So anaerobic respiration occurs in the absence of oxygen. In the absence of oxygen. So if you take yeast, in yeast pyruvate is converted into ethanol and carbon dioxide. This process is called fermentation. In muscle cells, when oxygen supply is insufficient during vigorous activities, the pyruvate may be converted into lactic acid, and the accumulation of lactic acid in muscle is associated with muscle fatigue and cramps. So for the efficient breakdown of pyruvate, there must be efficient amount of oxygen. If there is lack of oxygen, it will lead to the accumulation of lactic acid in the muscle, which will lead to pains and cramps in our body. In case of yeast, the pyruvate will be broken down into ethanol and carbon dioxide, which is the process of fermentation. So fermentation is in yeast is glucose is converted into pyruvate, and the pyruvate will be converted into ethanol, CO2, and gives certain amount of energy. So in anaerobic respiration, a very minute amount of energy is generated when compared to aerobic respiration. Next, aerobic respiration. In aerobic respiration, uses oxygen. Aerobic respiration takes place in the presence of oxygen. So the pyruvate which is formed in the cytoplasm enters into the mitochondria and is further broken down more efficiently by the oxygen. The end products are CO2 and water with a large amount of energy released. So in case of anaerobic respiration, we don't have the larger amount of energy. In case of aerobic respiration, due to the presence of efficient amount of oxygen for the breakdown, the energy will be released. More amount of energy will be released. So the aerobic respiration is therefore more efficient in releasing usable energy from the glucose. So glucose is converted into pyruvate, and the pyruvate upon oxidation gives carbon dioxide, water and energy. And this energy is stored in the form of ATP in the mitochondria. So the energy may be immediately utilized by the cells, or else it is stored in the form of ATP in the mitochondria. So the site for the further breakdown of pyruvate is mitochondria, which is oxygen is utmost required for the aerobic respiration. So let's see a quick comparison. So oxygen is required in aerobic respiration, it is not required in anaerobic respiration. So main site aerobic respiration occurs in the mitochondria plus cytoplasm. So some amount of glucose uh, breakdown into pyruvate occurs in the cytoplasm, and from the cytoplasm the pyruvate will be migrated into the mitochondria for the further breakdown and the generation of energy. So in case of anaerobic respiration, it occurs in the cytoplasm, which means the glucose is broken down into pyruvate in the cytoplasm, and the further process occurs in the cytoplasm itself. The products are carbon dioxide and water, and energy, which is more energy will be generated in case of aerobic respiration, and the Byproducts of anaerobic respirations are ethanol, CO2, or lactic acid, which are stored in the case of muscle, and the less amount of energy is produced. So this is the comparison of aerobic and anaerobic respiration and the fate of pyruvate in both aerobic and aerobic respiration. So let's see the human respiratory system. How does the process of respiration actually occurs in the body? So why do we need a respiratory system? Because in order to uh, take oxygen inside our body, so this oxygen will be utilized for the breakdown of glucose, oxidation of glucose to generate energy. So this respiratory system is tend to different in different kinds of organism. So when you see terrestrial organisms obtain oxygen from the atmosphere, while aquatic organisms obtain dissolved oxygen from water, the amount of dissolved oxygen in water is much lower than the amount of oxygen in air. Therefore, aquatic organisms generally breathe faster. In humans, air is taken through the nostrils and passes through the respiratory tract into the lungs. So let's see the pathway of air in human body. So nasal passage consists of nostrils and nasal cavity. From there, the air will be uh, passed through pharynx. So it is a root way for the air, and larynx, which is a sound box which generates sound. Uh, and from larynx to it travels to trachea, reaches the bronchi, bronchioles, and finally to the alveoli. So let's see this into a diagrammatic representation. So this is the diagram of human respiratory system where the air will be taken through nostrils, and from the nostrils it will reaches to pharynx, then larynx, and trachea, which is a windpipe. The trachea is also known as windpipe, where the air is only air is allowed into the trachea. So from the trachea we have, this is the trachea. This hole is trachea, and trachea consists of cartilaginous rings which prevents trachea from collapsing. And from trachea, the trachea will be divided into two branches known as bronchi, and the bronchi are further divided into small branches known as bronchioles. At the end of the bronchioles, you can observe the pouch-like structures known as alveoli. So the alveoli are the basic units, functional and structural units of the lungs, which means without alveoli, the lungs has nothing to do with. So alveoli are the sites of gaseous exchange. So let me show you, if this is the trachea, which is windpipe, and the trachea is divided into two small branches, the thoracic cavity, which are known as bronchi, and those bronchi are further divided into small branches known as bronchioles, and at the end of the bronchioles you can observe a pouch like structures known as alveoli. So the alveoli are the basic structural and functional units of the lungs where the gaseous exchange takes place. So this is the structure of human respiratory system, and we have the ribs. The lungs are present in the thoracic cavity enclosed in ribcage. Ribcage consists of ribs and a flat structure known as a diaphragm. So let's see the site of gases exchange. So alveoli is at most important. So whatever we have seen, which is nostrils, nasal cavity, pharynx, larynx, trachea. So this is a route for the entry of air inside the body. So where the gases exchange takes place is in the alveoli. So the alveoli are regarded as the site of gases exchange. The bronchioles finally terminate in tiny balloon-like structures called alveoli. So singular form is alveolus, and alveoli provide a larger surface area for efficient exchange of gases, and their walls are very thin and are surrounded by extensive network of blood vessels. So you can see here in the diagram. So yes, this is where the alveolar are located, which are rich in. So this is the alveoli, which looks like a balloon-like structures and rich in blood vessel network, where the blood circulates in them. So oxygen from alveolar air diffuses into the blood, while carbon dioxide diffuses from the blood into the alveoli. The blood carries oxygen to all the cells of the body. So why the alveoli are efficient? So have provides very large surface area, about 80 meters square when spread out. Thin walls for short diffusion distance, and rich blood supply for rapid gas exchange, and large number of alveoli increases the exchange area. So alveoli are the site of gaseous exchange, and alveoli consists of rich blood vessel network where the blood flows occurs, and the oxygen from the atmospheric air will be diffused into the blood of alveoli. So even though the oxygen is diffused into the blood, so there must be a certain molecule which has to be carry this oxygen molecule to the remaining parts of the body, and those molecule is nothing but hemoglobin. So role of hemoglobin in the gases exchange. So diffusion alone is too slow to deliver enough oxygen to all parts of the body, of large body. So hemoglobin is a red blood cell. So the hemoglobin is present in a red blood cell, binds oxygen and transports it efficiently through the blood, and the carbon dioxide is transported back to the lungs for the removal. So let me. So hemoglobin is a molecule consists of iron, which is present in the red blood cells, and one molecule of hemoglobin can efficiently carry four molecules of oxygen. So when the oxygen binds to the hemoglobin, form oxyhemoglobin, which will be transported throughout the body via blood. So this oxygen from the atmospheric air reaches the alveoli. From alveoli, it will bind to the hemoglobin to form oxyhemoglobin. Similarly, the whatever the CO2 which is present in the blood, which is present in the cells, which is present, which is generated during respiration. So what is the byproducts of respiration? Carbon dioxide, water plus energy, right? So the carbon dioxide which is formed inside the cell will be diffused into the blood. In the blood consists of hemoglobin, and the CO2 will be bind to the hemoglobin to form carboxyhemoglobin. Carboxyhemoglobin. So this carboxyhemoglobin again will be transported to the alveoli, where the carbon dioxide will leave the hemoglobin, diffuses into the alveoli and reverse its direction and send out through the nostrils. So this is what exactly happens. So yeah, so in the alveoli, the oxygen will be bind to the hemoglobin and will be transported to the entire body through circulation. So similarly, the CO2 which is generated during the process of respiration in the cells will be enters into the blood, binds to the hemoglobin, and when reversed back to the respiratory system, where it enters into the alveoli, leaves the hemoglobin binding and diffuses back into the respiratory system and send out through the nostrils. So the CO2 will be sent out. So this is the role of hemoglobin. So not only it helps in the transport of oxygen, but also it contributes for the transportation of carbon dioxide, which has to be removed, and carbon dioxide is transported back to the lungs for the removal. So breathing movements. So during inhalation, ribs move upwards and outward and the diaphragm flattens. The chest cavity becomes larger, causing air to enter the lungs. So for whenever the chest cavity becomes larger, there will be more space for the rushing of atmospheric air into the lungs. So so that the air, the whatever the oxygen present in the air will be efficiently diffused into the alveoli. So this is why the ribs and diaphragm flattens and the ribs enlarges. So during exhalation, which is the removal of uh, CO2 from the body, the chest cavity becomes smaller and air moves out. So when the chest cavity becomes smaller, there will be uh, creation of pressure in the body, which sends the air out of the body. So let's see an activities, few activities where we can prove there is a content of carbon dioxide in the exhaled air. So for this, take freshly prepared lime water in a test tube. Blow air through the lime water and note how quickly it turns milky. Take fresh lime water in another test tube and pass air through it using a syringe. Compare the time taken for the two samples to turn milky. So what will you observe? Exhale air turns lime water milky more quickly because it contains more carbon dioxide. So we can conclude that carbon dioxide is released during respiration. So carbon dioxide plus lime water gives a milky appearance due to the presence of calcium, due to the formation of calcium carbonate. So lime water consists of calcium carbonate. When it reacts with carbon dioxide, will make a milky appearance, and faster milkiness indicates higher CO2 concentration in the exhaled air. So let's see a diagram. So this is two test tubes where you took lime water, certain amount of lime water. So when you pass exhale air through lime water directly into the lime water from in test tube A, add through a syringe in test tube B. So the range of white coloration in the lime water is directly proportional to the concentration of carbon dioxide in the exhaled air. The more carbon dioxide in the air, the more milky appearance will be found. So with this we can prove the through respiration CO2 is produced. Next, breathing in fish. So let's see one activity regarding how the breathing occurs in other organisms by taking the example of a fish. So observe a fish in an aquarium. Notice the opening and closing of the mouth and movements of the gill slits or operculum. Count how many times the fish opens and closes its mouth in 1 minute. Compare this with the number of breaths taken by a human in 1 minute. Aquatic organisms need to move more water over the respiratory surface because water contains less dissolved oxygen than air. So, in case of fishes, how do they breathe? Oxygen is basically present in the oxygen is basically present in the form of dissolved oxygen in the water. So the fish opens its mouth in order to take all the water into its body. So from the water, the water will be rushed into the gill slits where the oxygen, the DO2, the dissolved oxygen present in the water will be diffused into the gill pouches. In this process, the breathing will be taken place in case of fish. So this kind of process this is the mechanism occurs in the fish, which we can compare it to the normal breathing of a human being. So the fish need to move more water over the respiratory surface because the DO2 is very less in water when compared to air. So respiration release CO2. Yeast can respire anaerobically by fermentation. Aquatic organisms obtain oxygen from the dissolved oxygen in water. So these are the key points which you should remember. So let's see the respiratory pathway again. So glucose is the 6 carbon compound which will be broken down into pyruvate, which is a 3 carbon compound due to partial oxidation. After that, the fate of the pyruvate will be decided through two kinds of respiratory pathways. One is aerobic respiration and the one is anaerobic respiration. So in aerobic respiration, the pyruvate will be oxidized or broken down into CO2 plus H2O and generate energy, larger amount of energy, which will be stored in the form of ATP. In case of anaerobic respiration, the pyruvate will be broken down into ethanol plus CO2, where in anaerobic respiration there is less amount of oxygen is present. And in case of muscle, the pyruvate will be broken down into lactic acid. So this is a lecture about respiration. So this is a brief and simple lecture. I hope you understand this lecture. Thank you.